I was originally a legendary mercenary king, but I was unexpectedly reborn as a hunter in the Greater Khingan Mountains in 1960. The original owner of this body became somewhat simple-minded due to a fever when he was young. Fortunately, he was born with a strong physique and became his father's hunting assistant from the age of 10. However, a few years ago, his parents passed away one after another, leaving behind his 16-year-old adopted daughter and him struggling to survive. A few days ago, Fugui heard from the villagers that the old ginseng in the mountains was very valuable, and one could be exchanged for a winter's worth of food, so he went into the mountains alone to find food. But he didn't bring much food and his clothes were thin, so he froze to death in a daze. After receiving the original owner's memories, an old man's voice suddenly rang out outside the coffin. "Daughter, listen to your second uncle's advice. Fugui is gone. After things are settled, come home with your second uncle and be your brother Xingli's wife." Heavens, I'm not even dead yet and they're already trying to force my wife to remarry. My anger was instantly ignited. Suddenly I clenched my fists and punched the coffin lid above my head. According to the original owner's memories, the old beast outside who took advantage of the chaos was my inhuman second uncle's son, Zhang Xingli, a scoundrel who always avoided work and whose mind was full of lewd thoughts. The next second, Zhang Yue's desperate voice came from outside. "Second uncle. I'm the one who brought death to the whole family. Do you still dare to let me in?" My second uncle retorted nonchalantly. "You girl, don't talk nonsense, we don't believe that." Hearing this, I couldn't hold back any longer and slammed another heavy punch into the coffin lid. The courtyard instantly fell silent. In the few old villages, amidst the crowd's shock and disbelief, Zhang Yue suddenly rushed forward, yanked open the heavy coffin lid. In the blinding sunlight instantly dazzled my eyes. I squinted and saw a pretty little girl with tears streaming down her face, clutching her mouth tightly. I forced a stiff smile at her. "Hello." Zhang Yue's suppressed grievances burst forth instantly and her sobs echoed throughout the courtyard. "Brother Fugui, you're not dead," she cried. "Look at me, I'm really breathing." The villagers hurriedly carried me into the inner room onto the heated kang, a traditional Chinese bed stove. The neighbors also helped light the stove. Uncle Zhang, seeing that he couldn't keep thinking about the woman, his old face turned a deep purplish red. He forced a smile. "Fugui, you should rest well, we'll go back now." Watching the group slink away, a cold smile crept onto my lips. I never thought that I, this iron-blooded mercenary, could be reborn in this age of starvation. After eating, Zhang Yue brought me a bowl of cornmeal porridge. I stared intently at the calendar on the wall. 1960, a year that could starve people to death. The little girl had refused to eat that porridge until I forced her to swallow 2 mouthfuls. I stared into her eyes and realized that we were completely out of food. Zhang Yue lowered her head and mumbled softly, "I'll go borrow some food from Uncle Zhang after I finish this meal." And tigers would avoid. If I don't get food today, the little girl and I will both starve to death in this dilapidated hut. Tomorrow, afterwards, I dressed neatly, put on the large cotton quilt that Zhang Yue had forcibly tied to my back, and plunged into the deep mountains and forests. Along the way, I used a sharp knife to carve escape routes on tree trunks, and casually set several ingenious traps with hemp rope. Unexpectedly, in these deep mountains, with a little effort, my legs could instantly leap several meters. This 190-centimeter tall body, like a mountain boy, was completely comparable to me in both strength and agility. My jungle-bound body, forged in the crucible of war in my past life, was immediately pierced by a gray shadow flashing across the treetops. It was a gray squirrel, a breed unique to northeast China. I was instantly excited. Not only because its fur could fetch a fortune, but also because if I followed the trail and raided its den, I could obtain life-saving rations. Sure enough, in less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, I pulled out several handfuls of high-fat pine nuts and hazelnuts from the tree hole. These oily nuts were undoubtedly the life-saving currency for the poorest people with no fat in their bellies. I continued to explore deeper into the ravine. Suddenly, I stopped abruptly. Looking down from my vantage point, I saw a dense flock of grayish-brown pheasants basking in the sun in a patch of dry, sparse grass. If I were to shoot one with a bow and arrow, it would surely scare away the entire flock. But then I simply removed all my equipment, leaving only a sharp knife. Then I ripped open the thick quilt on my back and crawled through the snow for a full half hour. Finally, I closed in, raised the quilt, and slammed it down like a net. An uproar erupted beneath it. My 190 cm weight held the situation firmly. Several unlucky ones were crushed to death on the spot. The remaining survivors were beaten unconscious through the thick quilt. Lifting the corner of the quilt, I saw a brightly colored rooster and 8 plump hens. This was a fantastic start. I deftly snapped the necks of all the pheasants, strung them on a spear with rope, and rushed back. Unexpectedly, the journey home was even more delightful. The snare I had casually placed earlier had tightly bound the hind leg of a large gray rabbit. I rushed over and killed it instantly. Carrying this mountain of flesh, I sprinted home. As soon as I kicked open the gate, I yelled, "Zhang Yue, come see my spoils." The little girl spun around excitedly at the pile of prey before her. She had long forgotten when she last had a good meat feast. We quickly scalded the meat with boiling water, singed it with flames, and gutted it. The two of us then deftly prepared the chopped chicken. Soon after all the pheasants were put into the pot, an irresistible aroma of meat wafted from the stove, making my stomach rumble wildly. But I knew that eating only this kind of high-protein lean meat wouldn't last long, so I told Zhang Yue to keep an eye on the heat. I picked up the 4 pheasants and headed straight for the production team leader, Zhao Kaishan's house. This man was very close to my deceased father. Uncle Zhao immediately agreed, handing me 2 cornbreads and offering generous terms, 10 jin of sorghum, half a bag of potatoes, and 2 cabbages. I never expected him to be so generous and immediately clasped my hands in a fist salute. I thanked him. But then he casually uttered a sentence that shattered the warm atmosphere. He stared at me with a puzzled look. "We just gave your family 50 jin of millet last month as compensation, and it's already gone." I froze on the spot, shaking my head silently with a cold face. I hadn't seen a single grain of rice. Zhao Kaishan instantly realized what was happening, his dark red face turning ashen. Now he understood everything. It was definitely my two-faced, heartless second uncle who had intercepted the grain and swallowed the life-saving food my father had risked his life for. Team leader slammed his hand on the table, his anger blazing. "Damn it, Zhang Debin, boss, second boss, stop eating and come with me. Think about this ridiculous drama." I sneered inwardly, grabbed a flatbread from the table and stuffed it into my mouth. Then I hoisted the full bag of grain I had received and strode back to the house filled with the aroma of meat. No one would have guessed that I, who was almost starving to death yesterday, was now with Zhang Yue. Sitting by a pot of juicy stewed pheasant, the next day before dawn, I packed my gear and plunged back into the snowstorm. Before leaving, I had a cold face. "Tell Zhang Yue the whole story. If your second uncle and his gang of bastards come looking for trouble, just call Uncle Wang and ask Captain Zhao for help. This world is so ironic. Those who suck blood are your closest relatives, but those who lend a helping hand in crucial moments are complete strangers." Afterwards, I followed the old path, not only retrieving the 2 pheasants I had caught in the trap yesterday, but also braving the snow that was almost up to my calves, venturing deeper into the primeval forest. Halfway there, I took out a roasted potato that I had warmed with my body heat, and just then a huge cylindrical pile of dung appeared on the snow and instantly caught my eye. This was definitely the mark left by a herbivore. Judging by its size, it must have been a large fire. I immediately took out my bow and arrow and crept forward along the mark. Unexpectedly, a group of plump roe deer were leisurely strolling in the forest clearing ahead. I hid behind a tree, took a deep breath, and instantly drew the bowstring taut. I fired an arrow. There was a whooshing sound as the rough arrow pierced through the thigh of a female roe deer. Unexpectedly, this sudden attack caused an uproar among the herd. In my panic, a silly roe deer suddenly charged straight at me with wide eyes. How could I let such a golden opportunity slip by? In a split second, I dropped my hunting bow and pounced, grabbing its neck tightly. Then I kicked it so hard I shattered its foreleg joint. Its 190 cm weight crashed down like a mountain, and the beast thrashed and howled beneath me. But my eyes were cold, as if I had instantly returned to the life-or-death melee of a European battlefield. I passed life. I drew my dagger and without hesitation slashed its throat and sphincter. Then I got up and walked towards the prey that had fallen after being shot by an arrow. Unable to prepare it, I sent it to its death. I strung the 2 roe deer, which weighed nearly 100 pounds in total, together tightly with hemp rope. In the blink of an eye, I carried this mountain of meat back to the courtyard. Zhang Yue saw the game on the ground and jumped 3 feet high with joy. "Today we ate roe deer meat. Tomorrow I will go to the town to sell it at the Supply and Marketing Cooperative to exchange for New Year's goods." Not only that, I picked up a big axe and chopped the unlucky coffin that was originally prepared for me in the yard into firewood in no time. As I swung the axe, I stared intently at Zhang Yue. "Zhang Xingli, that dog of a landlord. I must have bullied you a lot before, little girl," I said, my lips clenched tightly in fear, but a murderous intent surged in my eyes. "If he dares to come looking for death again, I'll tear his mouth apart." Meanwhile, far away on the other side, Zhang Debin had already lost all face. The whole village was pointing and whispering behind his back, saying he was after his nephew's wife. He had literally brought a dead man back to life. He was also berated by Captain Zhao, who came to collect grain. The old thief, driven to desperation, could only point to the sky and utter a vicious curse. "Captain Zhao, if you want to covet the rich's grain, let me out." Everyone knew that in those days, offending the production team leader meant facing an impossible life. No one could have imagined that my second uncle, Zhang Debin, who was always scheming to embezzle my pension rations, was now plotting with jealous eyes how to drain me dry. He had accidentally made contact with a workshop foreman at the steel mill, dreaming of getting his son, Zhang Xingli, a worker's status. But how could he ask for a favor without expecting something in return? This old bastard had set his sights on the wild game I had risked my life to obtain. Then he couldn't sit still any longer. They coaxed and tricked their way straight to my house. Unexpectedly, Zhang Xingli. Anyone who dared to steal the flesh I had risked my life for would be stabbed to death. Just then, a powerful old woman's roar suddenly echoed from the courtyard. "Who dares to bully my grandson?" The next second, 3 figures like iron towers strode through the gate. Leading them was my fiercely protective maternal grandmother, followed by my burly uncles Wang Taishan and Wang Taiju. Grandma Zhang Yue, overwhelmed with grievances, instantly burst into tears, throwing herself into the old woman's arms and wailing, telling them to get out. Grandma wiped away her tears while gritting her teeth and shouting fiercely. Then two mountain-like men without a word pressed closer step by step with a terrifying aura. Taiju slowly and methodically removed his gloves, his knuckles cracking as he did so. Zhang Deben was so frightened his legs went weak, and he even tried to rekindle their past drinking camaraderie. Zhang Xingli had already retreated to the doorway, but the aroma of the meat in the pot was too tempting for him to resist. This bastard actually pulled out a few 1 or 2 cent bills from his pocket and shamelessly declared he wanted to buy meat. Looking at his ridiculous face, I couldn't help but sneer. "Keep those few cents for yourself for the new year," I said. "Don't even think about getting a drop of meat or soup." Just then, at this critical moment, Uncle Wang Taishan stared intently at Zhang Deben and suddenly ripped off the black cloth covering half his face. Instantly, a bone-chilling coldness shot from the soles of everyone's feet to the top of their heads. His right cheek was a terrifying crater. Completely confirmed the legend that he had half his face licked off by a black bear in close combat. The oppressive aura, seemingly tainted with the blood of a wild beast, instantly shattered the psychological defenses of these hooligans. Zhang Deben and his son scrambled out of the yard. Even the most delicious meat couldn't withstand this deadly fright. They chased away the flies. My grandmother, holding my hand, tears streaming down her face, said she had already pulled strings with the production team leader and wanted to take us to live with her. Looking at these three people who were protecting my blood relatives without reservation, a surge of warmth I had never experienced in my previous life instantly coursed through my body. From that moment on, that cold-blooded killer vanished completely. I secretly vowed in my heart never to, with that call from my grandmother who was determined to protect this family bond with her life. I finally fully accepted Zhang Fugui's identity. At that moment, I completely embraced this heavy bloodline and kinship. With a sense of relief, I understood that the original owner's obsession with protecting his family had finally dissipated. He entrusted everything to me. "Grandma, don't worry, I can hunt, I won't starve," I said with a smile, urging everyone to eat quickly. Immediately afterward, my eldest uncle, Wang Taishan, pulled out a bag of frozen flatbread from his bundle. Zhang Yue deftly heated the flatbread in a pan and served it on the table along with half a basin of fragrant roe deer meat. Seeing the sumptuous meal, my grandmother and the other two stared wide-eyed. They never expected that I, Zhang Fugui, would, the once naive boy, actually manage to kill a roe deer. You see, these past 2 years have seen extreme food shortages. Even the grass in the outer mountains has been stripped bare. In my past life, I was a gun-wielding ancestor who licked blood from the edge of a knife. But to avoid giving myself away, I could only pretend to be clumsy. With a click, I loaded the bullets, squinted, and aimed at the base of the wall. With this thing, the entire deep mountain will be my exclusive hunting ground. No matter what ferocious beasts they are, as long as they dare to show their faces, even if God comes, I'll still smash them to pieces with one shot. The next morning, my two uncles set off to return home. Wang Taiju, dragging an empty sled, looked puzzled, thinking I was much more clever than before. Wang Taishan, however, lowered his voice, convinced it was the loss of my parents that had suddenly made me so insightful. He recalled my legendary hunter father, capable of single-handedly subduing a wild boar and killing a black bear with a spear. Therefore, Wang Taishan harbored a deep-seated obsession. He simply couldn't believe that such a powerful brother-in-law could be gored to death by a few wild boars. He strongly suspected that the most deadly thing in Wild Boar Gully wasn't the wild animals but the people. Meanwhile, I was dragging a heavy sled straight to the town's supply and marketing cooperative. It was almost New Year's, and I needed to exchange the remaining robes for money to buy chicken wings for Zhang Yue and my grandmother so they could make new clothes. But as soon as I slammed the large sack on the counter, the dozing fat woman rolled her eyes impatiently. "Buying mountain goods, I especially." He raised her voice, about to explode, but upon hearing it was roe deer meat, her eyes immediately lit up. 3 cents for skin, 5 cents for pure meat. "Good lad, you've got guts, 50 it is." The old man quickly counted out 10 5-yuan bills and slapped them into my hand. He called himself Old Son, always hanging around the grocery store at the end of the street. This first pot of gold after my rebirth in my hand, I was about to turn and leave when a fatal question suddenly flashed through my mind. "These days, what good is money? You need coupons to buy cloth and grain. Uncle Son, do you know where I can get cloth coupons?" I tentatively lowered my voice. Unexpectedly, Old Son, flattered by the uncle, smiled. "Oh, what a coincidence, young man. I happen to have some in my hand," and I gasped, unable to resist taking a second look at this unremarkable old man. I never imagined that a buyer I'd bumped into on the street would turn out to be a hidden director. This kind of business couldn't be done without an incredible fortune. So I pulled out 2 10-yuan bills and slapped them on the counter, asking for tickets. Old Son rattled off over a dozen different kinds of coupons: grain coupons, cloth coupons, oil coupons, etc., almost choking me on the spot. Then he dropped the bottom line: rice for 12 cents and flour for 16 cents. My head was spinning. I simply slapped all 50 yuan into the old man's hand, telling him to fill it with rice, flour, eggs, candy, and daily necessities. Old Son, holding a fortune equivalent to 2 months' wages for a city worker, was completely dumbfounded. He never expected that a country bumpkin like me wouldn't even have a second thought. Without even blinking, I could easily kill another roe deer in the mountains, as many as hairs on a cow. I stared at him intently and told him I trusted his character. The old man was so excited that he slapped his thigh and immediately befriended me. Afterwards, old Sun quickly prepared a whole rake full of New Year's goods for me. I still had 20 yuan left. My eyes narrowed and I lowered my voice to ask him if he had any explosives. Unexpectedly, the old man nodded nonchalantly. I suddenly realized that this was 60-year-old firearms and explosives. Nobody cared about them on the black market. I immediately threw all the remaining money into the pack. Then, dragging the mountain of New Year's goods back to the village, I found several half-starved old people sprawled against the wall at the village entrance. As I drove my sled over them, their eyes widened in shock, turning bloodshot. Faced with their probing questions, I casually replied, "New Year's goods," and continued walking without looking back. Little did I know that my retreating figure would drive them mad with envy. They then realized that I had not only hunted pheasants but also killed a roe deer. My heartless uncle Zhang Deben hadn't even had a sip of soup. At that moment, an old woman swallowed hard, trying to exchange her goods for meat, but was kicked hard by her husband. In those days, every household starving to the point of edema, my belly swollen like a drum. I was saved by a single bite of meat. Even the rats and dogs in the village had been eaten to extinction. Yet this orphan who almost froze to death managed to bring back a whole cartload of life-saving food. I didn't care about the people's murderous gazes. Sweating profusely, I dragged the sled into the yard. The next second, Zhang Yue darted out like a little bird, excitedly shouting as she looked at the cart full of supplies. Then she picked up a wax paper package containing half a pound of naked candy balls that I had bought. The little girl carefully popped one into my grandmother's and my mouths. To go back into the mountains and pull off a few big heists. A small roe deer could be exchanged for a mountain of gold. If I killed a wild boar or a Siberian tiger, I could definitely become rich in this famine year. Just thinking about the hunting rifle my uncle gave me made my blood boil. I hastily ate a mouthful of porridge, grabbed the weapon, and headed straight for the grove outside the village. No need to test the shotgun. I simply squeezed out a single bullet capable of taking down a tiger and loaded it into the chamber, with a crisp click of the barrel closing. I raised the muzzle and stared intently at a pine tree about 10 meters away, as thick as a calf. A loud bang followed, sawdust flying everywhere, and a jagged gash was instantly blasted into the pine trunk. Then I loaded another bullet. Pulling the trigger, a second deafening roar echoed through the pine tree, snapping it in half. Touching the scorching barrel, I grinned wildly. My marksmanship is still divine. Though the range is limited, it's more than enough for me to wreak havoc in the deep mountains and forests. I then reorganized my deadly gear. Threw it into my basket, but as I walked until midday, something strange happened. I didn't see a single pheasant feather in the forest. I was wondering if the roe deer herd had moved away when suddenly a cold wind carrying a strong smell of blood hit my face. I fixed my gaze on the dense forest upwind. Then I unloaded the sled and armed myself with a hunting rifle, slingshot, arrows, and a short knife. But after only a few dozen meters into the woods, the sight before me sent chills down my spine. Scattered across the clearing was a large expanse of pale skeletons, mixed with the mutilated remains of several roe deer, their entrails removed. I cursed under my breath. I'd stumbled into a den of wolves. I never expected these beasts to only eat the entrails, leaving me with plenty of meat. Without hesitation, I drew my knife and swiftly chopped down the two fattest roe deer. I dragged myself along on my hind legs. But no sooner had I tossed my long legs into the basket than a piercing wolf howl erupted nearby. The next second, the howls of over a dozen Eurasian gray wolves rose and another deafening shot rang out. The wolf's neck was instantly blasted open and the scalding blood stained the snow crimson, unexpectedly. In just a few minutes, 3 wild beasts had died. These beasts hadn't even touched my clothes before dying. My companions couldn't frighten these starving wolves. Just as I was about to fire more arrows to finish off the alpha wolf hidden in the shadows, I let out another low growl. The beasts immediately scattered, positioning themselves around the tree trunk to avoid being targeted. I gasped. If this wolf wasn't eliminated, it would surely be a huge menace in the future. Seeing that they wouldn't show themselves, I put down my longbow, took out a piece of dried meat, and slowly chewed it. There were less than 3 hours left until nightfall. If I didn't break the stalemate, my situation would be extremely dangerous once the sun set. Meanwhile, far away in the village, Zhang Yue, the little girl, blushing, was eagerly asking her grandmother to teach her how to knead leather, wanting to sew me a mink coat herself. Grandma, seeing her, beamed with joy, saying she was relieved as long as we were all right. Zhang Yue, looking out the window at the sky, worriedly wondered if Brother Fugui had hunted anything. Grandma patted her chest, guaranteeing that if anyone in the surrounding villages could surpass his father, it would undoubtedly be Fugui. Meanwhile, I, the one on whom so much hope was placed. Determined to wear me down, I simply gathered a pile of dry branches around me. And I struck matches and started a campfire. Turning around, I pulled out the rabbit I had just hunted from the basket, skinned it with a few quick strokes, gutted it, and stuck it into the fire to roast. Although my hands were busy, my peripheral vision remained fixed on the blazing fire. The burning flames clearly put immense pressure on these beasts. Many of the gray wolves that had been lying prone instantly became restless. Just as I reached out to flip the roasted rabbit, a very slight cracking sound suddenly came from behind me. Without thinking, I rolled 2 meters to the side, and the instant I stood up, my spear was already gripped tightly in my hand. It was the Wolf King. This beast had used an incredible amount of patience to slowly creep up behind me. It was entirely black, even larger than the one I had just killed. Its enormous head was bearing 2 rows of sharp fangs at me. This beast, no martial ethics, I sneered. Glancing around, I saw the other wolves were all lying in wait, watching the show. They seemed to want to see their leader fight one-on-one. Fine, I get my hands on you sooner or later. I quickly switched the spear to my left hand, and with my right, I swung the hunting rifle from my back, resting it on my left wrist. Bang, at the critical moment. Time to go home, but I was clearly too optimistic. Pulling an empty sled on the way here was easy, but dragging 200 kilograms was a struggle. Before I'd even gone 2 miles, it was completely dark. I couldn't go any further. I had to spend the night in the mountains. My heart sank. The temperature was plummeting. It was definitely going to drop to near degrees Celsius tonight, and I might freeze to death. I decisively found a birch grove in a sheltered mountain hollow, pulled out my axe, and quickly chopped down several thin trees, rapidly building a makeshift shelter. After building the A-frame hut, I frantically dug out the dead leaves from under the snow and laid them thickly on the roof, finally covering it with another layer of snow. When at the critical moment his grandmother, Hu Xianglin, stopped him. "Xiaoyu, don't worry, Fugui will definitely be alright. Grandma, you have no idea how close he came to freezing to death when he went into the mountains before." Zhang Yue stamped his feet in despair, but Hu Xianglin's aged face was full of certainty. Think about it carefully, how meticulously Fugui prepared for this trip into the mountains. He not only brought enough clothes, hats, bow and arrows, and a hunting rifle, but he even prepared matches and candy balls. His thoughtfulness is no less than his father's back then. Then the old lady ruffled Zhang Yue's hair. "There's no way to catch a big fire at the edge of the mountain. Fugui must have gone far away to catch a big fish. Besides, with the heavy snow blocking the mountains, it's impossible to find someone in the middle of the night. I believe that Grandma will not only return before noon tomorrow, but will also return laden with spoils." Meanwhile, deep in the mountains, as dawn broke, I crawled out of my hut. The blizzard overnight had raised the ground by half a foot. Worried that my family would be anxious, I used the embers to heat up some dry rations, quickly ate a few bites, and then smothered the fire with snow. Next, I tightly strapped all my equipment to the sled, leaving only my long gun and short knife on my body. I attached the tow rope and started heading down the mountain. The heavy snow blocked the road, making every step a treacherous path. I trudged along, 1 step deep, 1 step shallow, until the sun rose. Finally, I saw the village entrance. The rising smoke from the chimneys made me quicken my pace, thinking of my family, the old and the young, still anxiously waiting. I wished I could instantly appear before Zhang Yue and see the little girl's joyful eyes. As I spoke, my old face inexplicably flushed. In my past life as a top mercenary, I was killed by a drone at the age of 27 without ever holding a woman's hand. This was truly unbecoming of a king of soldiers. At the village entrance, Zhang Yue was already frozen like an icicle, staring intently at the road leading into the mountains. These days, I was the only one left in the entire village heading into the mountains. Death was a serious matter, especially for my family. Zhang Yue felt like he was being roasted over a fire. Just as he was about to despair, he suddenly saw my tall figure pulling the sled. Fugui, that girl, like a sparrow returning to its nest, threw herself into my arms. Even though the villagers were all sunbathing around us, he didn't shy away at all, acting as if he were announcing to the whole village that he would be my wife sooner or later. "My God, those are wolves." Immediately, several villagers who had been watching the spectacle swarmed around, staring intently at the beasts on the sled. For in total, all adult wolves, plus 2 roe deer legs. Gasps of astonishment rose and fell among the crowd. This cartload of prey was more than enough to buy a whole winter's worth of fine grain. I casually ruffled Zhang Yue's hair, telling him to push the sled home quickly. My stomach was growling with hunger, but the whole village followed us like we were watching a spectacle. My next words sent chills down everyone's spines. I'd only intended to catch roe deer, but I'd stumbled into a wolf den, casually killing several and even picking up 2 roe deer legs. A chorus of perfectly synchronized sobs erupted in the yard, seeing the incredulous expressions on everyone's faces. I decided to go all out with my bravado. 2 of them were shot with guns, 1 with an arrow, and the largest one was stabbed to death with a knife. These words, coupled with my body covered in black blood, made the villagers' legs go weak. Just as someone was getting greedy and wanted to trade sorghum for my wolf offal, an extremely piercing voice suddenly rang out. "Captain, he's provoked the wolf pack. What if these beasts come down the mountain to retaliate against our village?" It was Zhang Xingli who spoke. Although this bastard was a relative of the original owner, in my eyes he was a complete suicidal rebel. I coldly glanced at the scoundrel who couldn't change his ways, already plotting to find an opportunity to finish him off. Just then Zhao Kaishan, the production team leader who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion, suddenly blurted out a curse. "Stop talking nonsense. When wolves used to come down the mountain to steal chickens and goats, who were they taking revenge on?" Zhao Kaishan stared intently at the largest wolf carcass, immediately recognizing it as the result of a close-quarters battle. His gaze towards me instantly changed and he pulled me into the inner room. My grandmother followed closely behind. "Fugui, you've been exchanging grain for half a wolf. The canteen hasn't seen a drop of oil in over half a year." That evening, Zhao Kaishan beamed with delight. "Fugui, you've got real skills. I'll make sure you become the brigade's forest ranger with a month's salary. 8 coins for each game you hunt plus work points. Not only will you be issued guns and ammunition, but no one will dare say a word against you." I never expected such a good thing, I readily agreed. I knew perfectly well that in this era, getting rich through hunting and getting a government job was the key. Back in the courtyard, Zhao Kaishan glared at Zhang Xingli and threatened that everyone would go to the canteen for wolf meat that afternoon. Anyone who dared to cause trouble wouldn't be allowed to do anything. With the captain's words backing me up, Zhang Fugui had finally established himself in the village. As the envious villagers slowly dispersed, I finally got to eat a big bowl of meat and cabbage soup made by my grandmother. The hot soup made me feel comfortable from every pore. "Grandma, I'm going to town later to sell the remaining wolves and buy some scarce supplies. All the money in the house will be used for. It's all your responsibility," I said, frantically shoveling down my dumpling soup while arranging things. Hu Xianglin's eyes were filled with unwavering affection as she looked at me. She had been prepared to eat meagerly with me. But who knew I was not only quick-witted but also always came back with a full belly. The old lady even began to mutter to herself, "This isn't her taking care of her grandson, it's clearly me, this living devil, carrying the whole family on my shoulders." From now on, her only task was to look after Zhang Yue, my future daughter-in-law. If anyone dared to make a move on my Xiaoyu, this old man would fight them to the death. Hu Xianglin stared at us with a smile, then suddenly dropped a bombshell. "Grandma just hopes to live a few more years so she can help you two raise your child." Zhang Yue blushed crimson and turned to run into the house. I chuckled and tilted my head back to drink the dumpling soup at the bottom of the bowl. The house was spotless and there was even a rabbit. I decided to roast it that afternoon. The taste was absolutely delicious. However, Zhang Yue shook her head, complaining that the meat had shrunk and it was too wasteful. I decisively declared that our family would never lack meat again, and we could eat whatever we wanted to satisfy our cravings. Zhang Yue smiled like an innocent angel after hearing this, and with a swift movement she skinned the wolf completely. Not only was she quick and efficient, but she also chipped off 4 sharp wolf teeth, tied them tightly with a red string and handed them to me. This was our token of love. I deliberately gave a wicked smile like a big bad wolf. Oops, Zhang Yue blushed deeply, grabbed a bloody wolf intestine and threw it at my face. I was so scared that I ran away as fast as I could. Then I grabbed half a wolf carcass and a roe deer leg and headed straight for Captain Zhao Kaishan's house. I was thinking that I had to finalize the matter of the sidearm. This would definitely save a huge sum of money on buying a rifle. As soon as I entered the courtyard, the team leader's wife's eyes lit up with excitement at the sight of the valuable goods in the sack. She warmly welcomed me into the house. However, Zhao Kaishan, who had just returned, had a dark cloud over his face. "I've brought you the meat," I said, pointing to the sack on the ground. "You ought to be a hero in any situation." The next second, I rushed to the village entrance and joined Zhao Kaishan and 7 or 8 villagers in their search. As the snow seeped into the deep mountain road, Zhao Kaishan gritted his teeth and revealed to me that the missing people were actually 3 men and 2 women. Hearing that there were women in the group, I froze on the spot. Zhao Kaishan smiled bitterly and said, "One of them is a female educated youth named Jo Zume. She always says that women can hold up half the sky." This group of people, in order to eat some wild game, not only borrowed a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle, but also carried 20 rounds of ammunition and headed straight for Erdyaling. As long as they don't run into a pack of wolves, these people should still be able to be saved. I frowned. God likes to play tricks every day. Just then goose feather snowflakes danced wildly in the sky like knives. Our group struggled forward in the blizzard, making our way for a full 2 kilometers. Suddenly an extremely shrill scream came from the wind and snow. I grabbed Zhao Kaishan's shoulder, only managing to push the wolves back a few steps. With their ammunition almost exhausted and these beasts poised to tear them to shreds, Zhao Kaishan desperately stopped the villagers from firing. It was too dark, they might accidentally injure the educated youths. "All of you rush over there and get closer before you fire." But before anyone could react, I charged into the wolf pack like a cheetah. Zhao Kaishan, seeing this, could only grit his teeth and follow closely. Surprisingly, these beasts were intimidated by our reckless actions. I stared intently at the trembling, frantically firing male educated youth, utterly speechless. This guy fired several shots, but not a single drop of wolf blood was seen on the snow. Then Zhao and I, Kaisheng quickly turned around, raised his gun and aimed. 6 guns against a dozen wolves. This round was practically a sure win. To save bullets, I deliberately didn't pull the trigger immediately. Bang, bang, bang. Several shots rang out, booming and deafening. I never expected that the old men behind me were also masters of human outlines. All of my bullets went to waste. Before she finished speaking, the bowstring suddenly snapped. The next second, a charging wolf was pinned to the ground. The arrow pierced the wolf's neck and plunged more than half a foot into the frozen ground. Hot blood gushed out instantly and the entire wolf convulsed. He convulsed, unable to get up again. The entire room fell silent instantly. Everyone stared at me with wide eyes as if I were looking at a monster. I expressionlessly drew my bow and released a burst of arrows. The muffled thud, another wolf was immobilized. In the blink of an eye, I had wiped out nearly half of the dozen or so wolves. Seeing my arm getting sore, I casually slipped the longbow over my head and swiftly grabbed my hunting rifle with my right hand. With a deafening roar, the terrifying kinetic energy of the slug sent a wolf flying several meters. I skillfully removed the spent cartridge and stuffed it into my pocket, then loaded a new round. Immediately after, another shot blew the wolf's skull off. Red and white splattered everywhere. Jozume and the girl next to her covered their mouths in fright and gagged violently. By this time, more than half of the wolf pack had died or been wounded. The remaining animals finally howled in. As soon as the spoils left, the villagers immediately turned their eager eyes to me. "Captain, today everyone risked their lives. I think we should each take one wolf and the remaining one should be handed over to the brigade." I casually poked at the fire and finalized the distribution plan. As soon as I said this, everyone burst into laughter, especially Zhang Quanfu, who had stood up for me earlier. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of buck teeth. "This guy may be ugly, but he's extremely simple-minded. My father saved his life in the mountains years ago. He's risking his life for me. If I had really made a move, he definitely would have dared to. The first one to rush forward risked his life." And I immediately gave him a thumbs up, praising his scathing remarks. Zhao Kaishan also repeatedly praised me for my honesty. And immediately called everyone to descend the mountain that night. The group quickly cut branches to make makeshift sleds, and a dozen dead wolves were tightly tied to the crossbeams, dragging them across the snow at high speed. The thought of bringing home so much meat made everyone's legs feel like they had wings. Zhao Kaishan, dragging 2 wolves, followed behind me, probably secretly delighted. But we hadn't gone far when I suddenly stopped, staring intently at the dark forest around me. "Something," I whispered, and Zhao Kaishan quickly switched on his flashlight and followed my finger. Suddenly the light shone in that direction, and the next second a pair of eerie green pupils appeared out of thin air in the darkness. My God, it was a man-eating tiger. Zhang Quanfu was so frightened that his legs went weak and he collapsed onto the snow with a thud. I gripped the hunting rifle tightly in my hand and cold sweat instantly seeped into my palms. This beast had definitely been following us silently all the way. I quickly reached into my pocket to check my ammunition. There were still quite a few shotgun shells, but only 3 lethal slugs remained. The situation was extremely critical. I immediately ordered everyone to redistribute their formation. Those with guns were responsible for protection, and those without guns were to focus on hunting. Wolves and tigers are treacherous by nature and love to ambush from behind by locking their throats. I wanted to cover the rear myself, but Zhao Kaishan, relying on his cadre status, insisted on bringing me to the very back. I had no choice but to lead the way with my gun, leaving 2 men to hold the rear. As the column advanced, I quietly pulled a mysterious cloth bag from my pocket. This was a high explosive I'd gotten from Old Sun, which I'd carefully crafted into a deadly guillotine. I pried pieces of flesh from the wolf carcass, dissolved them in my hand, and then plastered them onto the explosives. I casually tossed it under a tree root. If that beast were greedy enough to take a bite, its head would be instantly blown to smithereens. In the darkness in the distance, a wild Siberian tiger, weighing over 500 pounds, was staring intently at me. Managed to twist his massive body in midair. With a muffled thud, the deadly bullet grazed his tiger ear and plunged headfirst into the hard, frozen ground. My right hand jerked sharply, the barrel snapping open in the process. In that instant, my left index finger flicked away the hot, empty cartridge case, and a brand new slug was firmly pressed into the chamber. The entire reload took less than 2 seconds. Looking up, I saw that the behemoth, after landing, had completely given up on Zhang Quanfu, who was right in front of it. His ear had been shattered by my bullet. The intense pain made this king of beasts instantly surrender, scratching and leaping as it fled into the dark, dense forest for its life. Oh my God, Zhang Quanfu slumped on the snow, howling. In the dim light, I glanced at him. His crotch was already soaked. Luckily, this guy was lucky. This escape from the jaws of death was enough for him to brag about for the rest of his life back in the village. Zhao Kaishan, his legs weak, clung tightly to a large tree, trembling as he asked if he was all right. Zhang Quanfu was in tears and snot streaming down his face. "Savior, if you're all right, let's get out of here. That beast's been shot and is wounded. It probably won't dare turn back." I stared at the trail of blood on the snow and coldly spoke. Zhao Kaishan, as if granted a pardon, nodded frantically, urging us to hurry. But when we checked our ammunition, everyone's heart sank. Zhao Kaishan still had a dozen or so rounds, the others had even fewer combined. I only had a few in my pocket. We only have a few shotgun shells left, but thankfully we can make it down the mountain. Captain, you'll walk ahead and fire a shot every now and then to scare off the wild animals. With so many of us dragging along the dead wolves, the pack won't dare come near. That tiger, having suffered a setback, probably won't be watching us anymore. I paused deliberately. Zhao Kaishan, a smart man, instantly understood the implication. Heh heh, that beast's belly's practically empty. He hasn't even gotten a hair out of our pockets. Where else could he go? Definitely file a complaint with the county authorities when they got back. Wu Yuan cursed the ungrateful wretch in his heart, thinking it would be better to let these good-for-nothings feed the wolves. However, no one expected that death had already silently descended. A huge and terrifying black shadow swept past the rear of the group like lightning. Wang Qi, the last male-educated youth, didn't even have a chance to resist. Only a very short ouch could be heard. Chen Jiguo suddenly stopped his long-winded lecture, turned around irritably, and the next second a bone-chilling coldness ran from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Wang Qi behind him had vanished into thin air. Several seconds later, Chen Jiguo managed to squeeze out a trembling scream. Captain Wu, Wang Qi is gone. Just now he cried out, ouch, and when I turned around, he was completely gone. Wang Fang was so frightened that she collapsed to the ground and burst into tears. Wu Yuan felt a chill run down his spine. The only creature in the entire mountain capable of snatching someone away with such terrifying speed was that man-eating tiger. He picked up his 50 or 60 rifles, pulled the bolt back with a clang, and fired without hesitation into the night sky. A loud bang echoed. At that moment, Wu Yuan was filled with despair. His breath caught in his throat. Less than 10 meters away in the pitch-black snow, a pair of terrifying green eyes were staring intently at them. Chen Jiguo was terrified out of his wits, but this bastard actually... Suppressing his scream, Wu Yuan frantically quickened his pace, desperately pushing towards the front. At this moment, Wu Yuan, who was at the back, thought he was completely safe. Only then did they scramble to their feet. Immediately afterward, Wu Yuan rushed to Chen Jiguo and opened fire. Wu Yuan yelled at Chen Jiguo, "You bastard, you definitely saw a tiger just now. This son of a bitch saw a tiger but didn't say a word, he just ran away. He's obviously using someone else as a scapegoat." It was morning. The blinding sunlight pierced through the branches and snow, shining directly on Zhang Quanfu's face. He faced the sunlight and breathed a long sigh of relief. "It's so good I didn't die in the mountains." Everyone nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with the relief of surviving a disaster. Zhang Quanfu lowered his head and silently clenched his fists. He was calculating in his mind that I had saved his life and my father had also saved his life years ago. He had to repay these two debts with his own life. In these damn times, every household was dirt poor, and he resolved to use his strength to wholeheartedly help me with the work from now on. At this moment, Zhao Kaishan shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, go home and rest well. Come to my house for dinner this afternoon." He had long regarded me as the village's lucky star and future successor, grooming me for him. I hesitated slightly, then immediately nodded in agreement. I didn't want to pretend to be some kind of otherworldly expert. Being able to integrate into the core circle of the village and live a stable life was definitely a good thing. Afterwards, everyone went into the village, everyone dispersed. I had just pushed open my courtyard gate when Zhang Yue greeted me chattering, "Brother Fugui, you're back. You must be starving, dinner will be ready soon." I laughed and pulled the heavy wolf carcass behind me into the yard. The little girl's eyes lit up. "You killed another wolf, Brother Fugui is amazing," I said, washing my face. "Little girl, it wasn't just one wolf, I told you we also encountered a tiger." Zhanglan came out with the food, her voice trembling with fear. "What, a tiger?" "Please don't get hurt," I replied casually, wiping my face. "It's all right, it just almost bit me. I shot the whole thing away with one shot." Just then I suddenly remembered that I was almost out of bullets. After dinner, I had to go find old Sun to get some more ammo. I quickly climbed onto the Kang-heated brick bed. On the table sat steaming hot steamed buns and porridge, along with a large bowl of fragrant meat sauce and sliced boiled roe deer meat. These days, eating such a purely natural meal was a dream come true. I casually broke open a hot steamed bun, spread a thick layer of meat sauce on it, topped it with cabbage leaves and 2 large slices of succulent roe deer meat, and a hardcore version of a northeastern-style roe GMO meat sandwich was instantly formed. I opened my mouth wide and bit off more than half. The intense oiliness mixed with the meaty aroma exploded in my mouth. I was so satisfied that my very soul trembled. Then I gulped down a mouthful of piping hot, sticky porridge. The unprecedented satisfaction was almost unbearable. Zhang Yue, watching me eat so voraciously, was practically drooling. I immediately copied her and made 2 more supersized rojimo, handing them to Grandma and Xiaoyu, urging them to try. The 2 of them took a big bite without hesitation. Zhang Yue's eyes lit up instantly, it was so delicious. After eating and drinking my fill, I lay down on the scalding hot. I fell into a deep sleep on the heated kang. Zhang Yue, being sensible, brought me hot water to wash my feet. Hu Xianglin watched from the side, her eyes full of smiles. I slept straight until noon. I quickly ate a couple of mouthfuls of cold rice. I loaded the sled full of wolf carcasses and headed straight for Old Sun's mountain produce shop. Soon as I entered, Old Sun saw what was behind me and his eyes almost popped out. He trembled and shouted, "Hey, you little rascal, where did you get so many big wild wolves? In the past few years, hunters would only bring one wolf at most. I never expected that I would bring a whole bunch today." Old Sun was shocked and grabbed a wolf's fur. "Good heavens, you little rascal, you bombarded the wolf den with a cannon," I chuckled. "Look at these wounds, which one looks like a cannonball?" Old Sun looked closely and instantly gasped. They were not only arrow and gunshot wounds, but also fatal stab wounds from close range. He suddenly gave me a thumbs up and exclaimed, "Delicious. In this damn famine year when everyone is starving, this bottle of tiger bone wine instantly elevates the meal to a whole new level." Zhang Quanfu, standing to the side, swallowed hard, his eyes gleaming as he stared intently at the bottle. Then Zhao Kaishan's wife brought over a stack of rough porcelain bowls, carefully pouring a small amount for each person. Zhang Quanfu nodded repeatedly, excitedly shouting, "We almost got fed to the tigers. It was all thanks to your life-saving grace." I laughed and clinked bowls with everyone. There was no need for such formalities among the four village brothers. They were all boisterous as they clinked bowls, but when it came to drinking they only dared to sip with their lips, seemingly reluctant. A second later, Zhao Kaishan roared, "Eat up!" He then added a peanut, feigning modesty. Unexpectedly, the others were completely unreserved, their chopsticks flashing as they frantically grabbed the meat. Watching these rough, ravenous men wolfing it down, I grinned and laughed out loud. At that moment, I truly felt part of this world. They were no longer cold, indifferent spectators, but a group of flesh-and-blood northeastern mountain people who would risk their lives for you if they had food to eat. Compared to our harmonious scene, Chen Jiguo on the other side was completely red-faced. He had led the educated youth up the mountain to hunt pheasants, only to lose Wang Qi's life. Couldn't possibly explain himself. Unexpectedly, this bastard, while Wu Yuan was reporting to his superiors, secretly sneaked into the educated youth office, knelt before Director Liu and threw mud at him. He wiped his snot. Tearful, frantic rant ensued. "Director Liu, the second team not only stole our prey, but Captain Wu is also heartless. They wouldn't let us rest, we had to travel all night, and they actually fed Wang Qi to the tigers. The organization will definitely investigate thoroughly and give you an explanation." Director Liu then instructed Chen Jiguo to go to the commune's small canteen to fill his stomach, while he immediately sent people into the mountains to find the body. Now Chen Jiguo felt completely at ease. He rushed to the canteen, faced with a full pot of tofu stew with vermicelli, and devoured it in minutes like a reincarnated demon. Meanwhile, Wu Juan, who had been waiting anxiously in the commune compound for half a day, finally met the commune's secretary. He dared not conceal anything, recounting the whole story, including the fact that Zhao Kaishan and others had saved his life. He had already prepared for the worst. At worst, he would simply quit being the production team leader. He even considered, "Tomorrow I'll go to the second team to talk to Zhao Kaishan and thank him in person." However, just then, Wu Yuan suddenly recalled the sneaky figure he'd caught in the courtyard earlier, and a chill ran down his spine. He immediately guessed that the bastard had gone to the educated youth office to shift the blame onto him and the second team. Luckily, he didn't hesitate and went straight to the secretary. These days, it's not the mistakes you make that are scary, it's the backstabbing and spreading rumors. Whoever gets the upper hand first can control the other side. Those educated youth were already resentful because the second team hadn't shared any of the wolf meat. They didn't care about the life-saving grace. But there was one thing they weren't sure about: they were willing. Would clear his name completely. The scene shifts back to Zhao Kaishan's house, after a hearty meal. Zhao Kaishan patted his chest. He assured me, "Fugui, your forest ranger paperwork will only take a few more days. No one in our brigade will dare utter a word against it." And he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "As for the rifle," he said, "I'll get the commune to personally pick out a good one for you." I smiled, nodded, and thanked him. I knew perfectly well he considered me a brother he'd risked his life for. Afterwards, the villagers, having finished their meal, left to go home. But I deliberately lingered until the very end because I had to stay behind alone to tell Zhao Kaishan the truth. "Captain," he said, "where are the big robes near our village?" Who would have thought that my casual question would lead to such a huge sum of money? Zhao Kaishan, his face flushed, after downing 2 bowls of sweet potato wine, pointed west. "If you walk 10 kilometers into the mountains outside the village, there's a large lake covered with half a meter of ice." Hearing this, I instantly perked up. My mind suddenly flashed back to what Old Sun had told me during the day. This old man was indeed incredibly influential. Not only did he run his business blatantly, but he also had 2 super clients, the Statron restaurant and the steel mill. Not only had all the wolf meat I had caught been bought by the restaurant at high prices, but the steel mill leaders were also frantically searching for New Year's goods. I never expected that Old Sun would directly tell me that as long as there was good stuff I could get it and the price would be negotiable. That's why I decided to try fishing under the ice. A renowned weapon for drawing blood, the triangular bayonet on the right side of the barrel was deadly with a single thrust. In my past life as a top marksman, having this weapon with an effective range of 500 meters instantly boosted my combat prowess. With this gun, I felt completely confident. The next morning, I grabbed my tools and pushed open Zhang Quanfu's gate. His wife was hanging wolf pelts to dry. Upon seeing me, her enthusiasm was overwhelming. She practically worshipped me. After all, my feat of single-handedly taking on a wolf pack and severely injuring a tiger the previous day had completely stunned the hunters of the surrounding area. I rushed into the house and shouted, "Zhang Quanfu, come with me into the mountains." Zhang Quanfu didn't even ask what we were doing. He casually tucked his hunting knife into his hand grenade and charged out. In the blink of an eye, the two of us braved the wind and snow, crossed several mountain ridges, and arrived at the man in the thick snow. The man beneath was as solid as a rock. Zhang Quanfu, wielding a heavy ice pick, huffed and puffed for a long time, panting heavily. I snatched the ice pick and smashed it with all my might, sending ice shards flying everywhere. A burst of icy lake water gushed out instantly. We followed suit, chiseling out 7 or 8 holes in the ice. Zhang Quanfu used a long pole to tie a net line, and like threading a needle, he laid the dozens of meters long fishing net firmly under the ice. Then he picked up a stone and frantically smashed the ice surface, desperately trying to drive the fish into the net. At this moment, I stared intently at the opening of the net and suddenly pulled it up. "Here it comes, holy crap, what a big fish," Zhang Quanfu shouted excitedly as the net broke through the ice. Over 30 kilograms of plump, wild crucian carp were caught, and the riverbank flowers instantly piled up on the snow. It was almost noon, and the pile of fish had grown into a small mountain. This pure, natural game was far superior to the fish raised on feed in my previous life. I slapped my thigh and shouted, "Start a fire and grill the fish." Zhang Quanfu immediately rushed into the woods, gathered birch bark and firewood, and lit a bonfire. We each picked a 3 or 4 kilogram fish, gutted it, and placed it directly on the fire to grill. As I crushed a handful of coarse salt and sprinkled it on, a rich, smoky aroma instantly exploded across the snow-covered plain. This incredible fragrance was so enticing. Afraid of attracting wild animals, I quickly grabbed my hunting rifle and carbine. If it weren't for a monster that had become a spirit, daring to step within 50 meters of me, it would definitely come to kill me. Just then a strange chirping sound came from behind me. My hair stood on end, and I jumped up and turned around, instantly locking the muzzle of my gun on the target behind me. Zhang Quanfu was so scared that he didn't even bother to wipe his mouth. Holding his gun, he turned around like a headless fly. Looking down at me, I gave a helpless snort. He lowered his head tremblingly, and then his knees buckled and he knelt down on the snow. There was a pure white fox without any blemishes, sitting 2 meters away, leisurely licking its paws. Oh my God, a fox spirit appeared in broad daylight. Zhang Quanfu was so scared that he dropped his gun and clasped his hands together frantically, as he kowtowed and mumbled. I held my gun and sneered. "This little thing is nothing," I said. "I could crush it with one hand. So you fox spirit, here to beg for a title?" I raised an eyebrow at him. Surprisingly, the little guy wasn't afraid of my murderous aura at all. Instead, he sniffed and stared intently at the roasting fish on the fire. I never expected this thing to be begging for food. I was overjoyed and casually picked up a raw crucian carp and threw it at him. But the white fox lowered its head, sniffed it, and with a look of disgust used its paw to push it away, continuing to stare longingly at the cooked fish. "You fox think raw fish is too cold, huh?" I laughed loudly, tore off a piece of fragrant, glistening cooked fish, and threw it over. The little fox immediately treated it like a treasure. It started tearing into the white fox and taking big bites. After a couple of bites, it looked up at me with an incredibly human-like expression. "All right, let's go. I've given you the biggest fish." Reluctantly, I picked out another fish, cleaned it, and put it on the fire to grill. Zhang Quanfu's eyes widened. He looked at the white fox, then at me. "Fugui, why aren't you scared? This is a fox spirit." "A fox spirit, so what? I even gave him the grilled fish. If it were a wolf, I would have shot it dead long ago," I retorted with a cold laugh. As a reborn person, my attitude towards this world is very pure. Since this little thing seems to have a spirit, I don't plan to kill it and eat it. Zhang Quanfu watched me and the white fox chatting and laughing, feeling a chill run down his spine. Then he smelled a burning smell. He suddenly woke up with a start and quickly flipped his grilled fish over, enduring the scalding heat to tear off a piece of fish and stuff it into his mouth. "It's cooked. It's delicious, Fugui, you eat this. Stop talking nonsense, eat yours." I casually pulled a bottle of baijiu from the sled, uncorked it, and handed it to Zhang Quanfu. Without any politeness, Zhang Quanfu picked up the bottle, took a big gulp, and exclaimed, "Comfortable." If it were half a month ago, he would never have dared to imagine that he could live a life of drinking and eating meat every day. Then this honest man started to worry about the future, afraid of enjoying blessings he shouldn't have. But now, having escaped death and eating grilled fish with a fox, his worldview had been completely shattered by me. I had just taken the bottle and taken a sip when I noticed that the fox, The little fox was staring intently at the bottle. Licking its lips. What, you want some of this too? I shook the bottle. The white fox immediately let out an urgent chirping sound. Okay, if you drink too much, no one will take you back to Uden. I took out my hunting knife, poked a small hole in the ice, poured in a little liquor and handed it to the little fox. The little fox tentatively sniffed it, instantly becoming alert by the strong aroma. Ha! The little fox immediately gasped wildly from the spiciness. I looked at its comical appearance and burst out laughing, but then the little thing glared at me fiercely, lowered its head again and started licking it up vigorously. In the blink of an eye, it had licked the liquor clean. Damn, it actually got dizzy. I looked down at him, but the little fox ignored me and continued gnawing on his fish. Before long, his movements began to slow, his snow-white head swayed slightly, and his bright eyes became completely glazed. Then he went from eating standing up to eating lying down, seemingly about to pass out. The little fox actually wobbled up to my rake and buried his head in the blanket, completely sprawling out. Zhang Quanfu shook his head like a rattle, exclaiming that the fox was trying to scam me. I waved it off nonchalantly. After eating and drinking our fill, we continued casting the net. In half a day, we actually managed to catch 3 full sacks of wild fish. After loading the sled, I looked at the little fox still fast asleep. He was so drunk in the countryside that if he encountered wolves or tigers, he would surely die. Today I'm taking you home, you can leave whenever you want. I patted his head. The little fox was fast asleep and didn't react. So I pulled the sled home, laden with a load. Meanwhile at my house, Zhang Yue, her ears red, shoved the bag of banknotes I'd given her into the bottom of the cupboard. In 2 years she'd turn 18 and we could officially get married. However, this girl had been incredibly troubled lately. Especially old Li from the front yard. This old woman was a semi-professional matchmaker and lately she came to chat with my grandma. Her words full of inquiries about how much grain I could earn, and even scheming about which girl from the neighboring village would be suitable to be my wife. Zhang Yue was furious. Today that old woman Li was sitting shamelessly in the house again. I dragged the sled into the village and went with Zhang Quanfu to Zhao Kaishan's house first, where we dumped a whole sack of fish on him. Old Zhao was overjoyed. He was sure to have a very comfortable new year. Then we went to Zhang Quanfu's house. I pretended to unload the second sack, but Zhang Quanfu held it firmly and wouldn't let go. Fugui, I'll keep a few small ones. You're taking all of these back. What nonsense, let's do it together, 1 sack each. I grabbed his belt with one hand. I suddenly pulled Zhang Quanfu back, casually dragging him aside. He watched as I stood the sack upright on the ground. His eyes instantly reddening. Enough talk, sister-in-law, hurry up and prepare 2 fish to make soup for the child. Look how thin this child is. I gestured with my chin towards Quanfu's wife. Quanfu's wife looked at her husband, saw he could only grin foolishly, and immediately happily told her daughter to get scissors to kill the fish. I waved my hand and turned to leave. Zhang Quanfu immediately took down the damaged fishing net, planning to clean and repair it tonight. We had already discussed it, and we'd fished a few more times in the next few days, keeping enough for food and selling the rest for money. At this time, the white fox had already woken up. And the whole family hadn't noticed. I dragged myself. The moment the sled stepped into the yard, the white fox jumped down and spun around happily. Zhang Yue's, who had been pouting, instantly beamed with joy. Grandma and Old Lady Li came out to greet him. Old Lady Li had never seen me return from a hunt with such a bountiful catch. For her, who drank sorghum porridge every day, the pungent fishy smell was almost unbearable. She stared intently at the sled, swallowed hard and proactively tried to ingratiate herself. Fugui's back, what good stuff did you get? Yes, you're back. I replied casually, not taking the mercenary old woman seriously at all. But seeing my cold attitude, she shamelessly cut to the chase. Fugui, Aunt Li has a niece in the 5th team in the south. She's pretty, let me introduce you, how about it? Hearing this, I froze on the spot. I turned to look at my grandmother and Zhang Yue, only to see the old woman and the young girl rolling their eyes at the same time. Zhang Yue's eyes were especially red with grievance. This stranger who came out of nowhere doesn't even know I have a wife. I couldn't be bothered to pay any attention to him. He simply dragged the sack into the barn, put away the hunting rifle and asked, "Is dinner ready? I'm starving." I glanced at old Li and casually asked if she wanted to eat with him. In Northeast China, keeping someone at mealtimes is just a formality. A normal person would have left long ago. But this old woman seemed to be bewitched and leaned forward. Just as they were about to forcefully promote her niece, old Li suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Everyone in the room jumped in fright. Following her gaze, Grandma and Zhang Yue gasped. There, crouching on the ground, was a snow-white fox staring intently at them. What happened to this fox spirit? The white fox turned to look at old Li, its previously smiling face suddenly baring its teeth fiercely. Oh my God, don't blame me, don't blame me. Old Li, terrified, clasped her hands together and retreated along the wall, fleeing in a flash. Seeing this, Zhang Yue wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she felt the fox had avenged her and scared away the uninvited guest. The fox immediately turned its head and smiled at Grandma and Zhang Yue. It chirped obediently. It laughed and explained to them that I found this little creature in the forest while fishing. It wasn't afraid of people and even followed me around asking for fish. But it had a very low alcohol tolerance. After a few sips of beiju, it got drunk and died in my bed, so I simply brought it home. Grandma's eyes widened when she heard this. You little rascal, do you know what this is? How dare you bring it home? I said nonchalantly. It's just an Arctic fox that came south to hunt for food. But Grandma wouldn't listen to that. She herself was surnamed Fox and firmly believed that this was a living fox spirit. Then she grabbed Zhang Yue, who was trying to touch the fox's head. With a tense expression, he questioned me about my intentions. He said, if I dared to say I was going to kill a fox and eat its flesh, he'd fight me to the death. What can I do? I replied. He seems quite clever, let's just keep him. Hearing this, Zhang Yue couldn't hold back any longer and reached out to touch the white fox's head. Teeth but even nuzzled affectionately in Zhang Yue's hand. The little girl's eyes sparkled and she immediately decided to name it Zio by Little White. Grandma's face twitched in exasperation. Don't be ridiculous, how can you give a guardian spirit such a ridiculous name? She cried. Others have to ask the spirit to possess them. But this fox just moved in, however what's done is done. Seeing Zio by giggling and playing with Zhang Yue, Grandma was helpless. She couldn't just chase the fox spirit away, she could only mutter unforgivable sin. While watching Zhang Yue feed Zio by a meat-soaked pancake. The next morning, Zhang Quanfu and I were preparing to set off to continue our fishing expedition. These past few days, if we kept working, we could make a lot of money. But before we even left the village, the production team's loudspeaker suddenly blared through the air. Zhao Kaishan's voice came from inside. Hey, 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 not only did Quanfu and I stop, but even Xiaobai, who was lying on the sled, perked up his ears. Then Zhao Kaishan shouted 3 times over the loudspeaker, announced that everyone in the village should go to the brigade headquarters for a meeting at noon. Quanfu and I exchanged a glance and silently dragged the sled home, planning to take a nap before joining the fun. After all, this was the first time I had attended a collective meeting since my transmigration, and I couldn't be absent if I wanted to fully integrate into this era. At noon, the parties involved gradually gathered at the brigade headquarters. Zhao Kaishan, who served as both secretary and team leader, immediately got to the point after everyone arrived. Folks. Because there are a few important things to announce. Then the first thing he said landed right on my head. After discussion by the team, it has been decided that Comrade Zhang Fugui was formally appointed as the forest ranger of our production team. From today onwards, the heavy responsibility of protecting the forest will fall on his shoulders. Everyone should support his work. Before everyone could digest this news, Zhao Kaishan's tone suddenly became serious. The government had just issued a joint defense document, and a fugitive had entered our forest area. Everyone should try not to go into the mountains unless necessary. If you find any suspicious persons, report them immediately. Don't be reckless and try to catch them yourself. Then he added, also the commune is investigating the missing educated youth of Team 3. This has nothing to do with you. Nobody should ask around or chatter. As soon as the meeting ended, Zhao Kaishan grabbed me and gestured for me to stay. Only after everyone had left did he close the door behind him. Then he took out a beige paper and a small notebook from the drawer and solemnly handed them to me. This is your appointment letter and identification. Take these with you when you go into the mountains in case you encounter anyone. It'll come in handy. I took the document and glanced at it. The black and white text read, Forest Ranger of the 2nd Production Team, Hunxing Forest Farm, term of office is a full 5 years. I grinned. I can't believe I've managed to get a secure job in this day and age. Zhao Kaishan, however, looked serious. Fugui, you often go into the mountains, so be careful. Next time you hunt, try to bring a few more people with you. He then turned and opened a cabinet, pulling out a dark green canvas roll. Inside lay a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle. I don't think those educated youths are good people. As soon as the official appointment was announced, I immediately became the center of attention in the whole village. In those days, every household was tightening their belts to make ends meet, but I not only got to go into the mountains to eat meat, but I also got a stable job as a forest ranger with a monthly salary of 8 yuan. Not only that, Zhang Yue even got a brand new floral cotton-padded jacket. This huge contrast made Liu Gixiang from my second uncle's family green with envy. Seeing the strong laborers in the village still struggling to earn work points, she was filled with twisted sourness. So she pointed at my second uncle Zhang Debin's nose and cursed, I told you to go to Director Li in the county to handle my son's matter, but you keep putting it off. Facing his wife's tantrum, Zhang Debin hunched over on the edge of the kang and retorted irritably, you can't ask someone for a favor without bringing something decent. You want me to go empty-handed. Then he took a deep drag on his cigarette. He rushed straight for my yard without hesitation. At that moment, I was in the yard with Zhang Yue, sorting through the spoils of the past 2 days. The newly issued rifle and bullets had already been carefully stored behind the cabinet. These past few days had been incredibly lucky. Several sacks were filled with large fish weighing 7 or 8 pounds each, besides keeping some for our own consumption and to exchange for money. I also specially packed a bag of small, miscellaneous fish, a special ration for Xiaobai to eat with cornmeal. Just then, the yard gate was pushed open. Wow, Fugui, so many fish, I turned around and scanned. After searching my memory for a while, I finally managed to make a rough connection. It was my second aunt, with whom I had little interaction and who had even withheld my food rations. I suppressed my impatience and gave her a perfunctory reply. Zhang Yue completely ignored me, quickly hiding the good fish behind her. Liu Gixing was taken aback by my lukewarm attitude, but her greedy desire instantly overcame her embarrassment. She shamelessly pressed closer, wanting to ask for a couple of fish to try. Looking at her persistent, shameless behavior, a thought suddenly flashed through my mind. Since she was determined to take advantage, why not just give her some scraps? I casually picked up the bag of fish scraps I was preparing to feed the foxes. If you don't mind, there are still some broken pieces in here. Liu Gixiang's eyes lit up before I could even finish speaking. He snatched the bag into his arms. Oh, thank you so much, Fugui. Then, as if on air, he dashed out of the yard without even finishing a polite greeting. Watching his fleeing figure, I almost burst out laughing. Turning around, I met Zhang Yue and Xiaobai's resentful eyes. Fugui, why did you give away the fish scraps you left for Xiaobai? Xiaobai even chimed in with a pitiful whimper. I suppressed my laughter and comforted them, saying, we'll go catch more tomorrow, there'll definitely be enough. Meanwhile, Liu Gixing ran home at breakneck speed. He slammed the bag of smelly fish scraps in front of Zhang Deben. Look at this, Zhang Deben exclaimed. The smell of fish was so enticing that his mouth was watering. He was about to reach for the bag when Liu Gixing slapped him hard across the face and told him to get out of the way. You don't deserve to eat this, he thought. His cousin Zhang Xingli, who returned shortly after, was also drooling with envy. He too was met with a barrage of insults from Liu Gixing. In his wishful thinking, this bag of treasure had to be delivered to the city intact. As long as he could use this bag of good fish to secure a worker's position for Director Li's son at the steel factory, he would have everything under control. Then the whole village would have to look at Liu Gixing with a second glance. With this dream in mind, Zhang Deben strode confidently into the city the next morning with the bag of fox feed as a gift. Meanwhile, Quanfu and I once again trudged through the snow. Watched us work closely. Suddenly, Quanfu stopped what he was doing, looking at me with a worried expression. Fugui, he said, let's finish this today and call it a day. The captain said there are fugitives in the mountains and we keep going in there, it's too dangerous. I smiled nonchalantly. With me here, nothing bad will happen. Then I went along with it, telling him not to go into the mountains after this job. Quanfu immediately became agitated, thinking I was blaming him for being cowardly. I sneered, a cold glint in my eyes. I didn't criticize him, I just wanted to deal with those fugitives. The words, "It's inconvenient for you to be carrying a fugitive," struck Zhang Quanfu like a bolt from the blue, nearly causing him to collapse onto the ice. What, you're going to deal with a fugitive? The silence of the forest in broad daylight sent a chill down his spine. Just as Quanfu was about to speak up to dissuade him, the white fox that had been lying beside him suddenly stood up abruptly. Then the white fox, its highly intelligent eyes fixed on the dense forest to the south, instantly sensed an extremely dangerous aura. Without hesitation, I immediately dropped the fishing net I was halfway pulling and retreat server. The entire server was completely bewildered, having no idea what was happening. Then he suddenly widened his eyes and saw me, while pretending to leisurely drink water, secretly loading a rifle with my other hand. The oppressive feeling, almost like zero combat, terrified the entire server, making them afraid to even breathe. He trembled and scurried to my side, his heartbeat clearly audible. While stroking Xiaobai's soft fur, I gave the order in a voice only the two of us could hear. Grab the hunting rifle, someone is hovering in the southern woods. The voice trembles, making him shake with fear. I casually reassured him that he was probably just a villager who had come to fish, but in my heart, the ice was even clearer than the surface of ice. No legitimate fisherman would be sneaking around in the woods, hiding in the shadows. Even worse, we were in the middle of a vast, open expanse of ice, the enemy hidden and us exposed. Our position was at a severe disadvantage. If the enemy had any weapons, we would have no chance of survival. Our only cover was the 2 frozen sacks of fish on the sled. I was certain that the people hiding in the woods were armed and tough. The militia captain, Zhao Kaishan, had previously confided in me about 2 vicious, armed thugs from the neighboring province, brothers Wang Feng and Wang Li, who had committed an armed robbery at the hospital. After being caught, they immediately killed to silence witnesses, even killing 7 or 8 people in their escape before finally reaching the deep mountains and forests. The captain had given me a meaningful warning. never go into the mountains recently because these ruthless bandits who kill indiscriminately are 100 times more ferocious than lone wolves. I never imagined I'd run right into these two devils today. Yet instead of fear, I felt an uncontrollable surge of excitement. Two amateur, armed thieves posed no real threat. I stared intently at Quanfu and asked if he trusted me. Quanfu gritted his teeth and sled. I casually pushed a bag of frozen fish chunks down as a shield. Then I ordered him to pretend to run south and hide as soon as he reached the edge of the woods. As long as he did as I said, we could escape this desperate situation. I immediately huddled up on the ice, tightening my body and moving slowly north like a snail, the tow rope tightly around his shoulder. Little White cooperated perfectly, leaping off the sled and squatting beside me. Under the cover of the sled, I kept a close eye on the movements in the southern woods. Those starving bandits were definitely after these bags of fresh fish. The reason they hesitated to fire was because they lacked confidence in their marksmanship. These desperate criminals planned to wait for us to approach the forest with our sleds before taking a fatal shot at close range. Their plan was indeed shrewd. However, they hadn't anticipated that I had a superhuman fox with me. Foxes are known for their exceptional sense of smell. Even through thick snow, they could pinpoint the location of field mice. The scent of two living people dozens of meters away was like a searchlight in the dark to Xiaobai's nose. I gently patted Xiaobai's head, promising him a treat when we got home. At the same time, the entire team behind me had successfully moved to the edge of the forest. Then he gasped for breath and leaped up like a rabbit, plunging into the forest. The atmosphere in the dense southern forest was extremely tense. Wang Li was holding a homemade. The gunman, his face contorted with anxiety, questioned his elder brother. Wang Li, however, raised her gun dismissively, sneering, "Even if you buy 10 hats, we're not afraid of you. These two peasants dare to come near, I'll send them to their next life." But Wang Fang stared intently at the motionless burlap sack on the ice. "Don't talk nonsense, the guy behind the sack is aiming a gun at us," he yelled in a low voice as he backed away slowly through the snowdrift. The deathly silence on the lake gave him an unprecedented sense of oppression. In his eyes, anyone with such terrifying tactical skills was definitely a tough nut to crack. Just as the bandit was trembling with fear, I was lying under the sled, locking onto the target through the gaps in the snow. Confirming that there was no sound behind me, a cruel smirk curled at the corner of my mouth. The show was finally about to begin. I hadn't fired yet because I wanted the whole team to retreat safely. Now, unless the other side was an idiot, they were definitely already preparing to run away. I deliberately held back from pulling the trigger, wanting to savor this long-lost battlefield pressure. Making every cell in my body, just as Wang Li was frantically screaming and slowly retreating, Xiao Bai suddenly stood up. I reacted swiftly, pressing the fox's head firmly into the snow. Bang, a deadly bullet whizzed past, grazing the sack's scalp. The deafening gunshot terrified the little fox, causing it to frantically burrow into the snowdrift. I pressed hard on its forehead, warning it not to move. The next second, I abruptly raised my gun, aimed at the dense forest, and fired 2 shots. In quick succession, bang, bang, the hot bullets accurately struck the tree trunk in front of Wang Li's head. Splinters of wood flew like projectiles, pelting his face. This godlike accuracy made the bandit's heart stop. Actually, these 2 shots were purely for maximum firepower suppression. The instant I pulled the trigger, I sprang up like a cheetah, sprinting towards the nearest forest to the west. Retreating in a straight line in the open area was tantamount to giving others free rein. Being a sitting duck, only by moving laterally at lightning speed can you completely disable the enemy's aim. I traversed the deadly 50-meter distance in an instant. Wang Li, still shaken, looked up and saw only a terrifying afterimage tear through the defenses and disappear into the woods. Wang Fang, standing nearby, was so terrified she immediately broke down. "Damn it, run!" With a desperate scream, the 2 ruthless bandits turned and fled. These armed bandits, who had killed 7 or 8 people, were now my prey, toying with me in the deep forest. It's a living llama with X-ray vision. I saw Wang Li closely following Wang Fang. After I rushed into the woods, I didn't rush in. After all, the enemy held. Immediately after grabbing the 2 real weapons, Wang Fang dove behind a tree, raising his gun to provide cover for his brother Wang Li, who sprinted forward like a mad dog. Once Wang Li was far away, he raised his gun again to cover. His older brother, this pair of brothers, relying on this tactic of alternating cover, had once single-handedly taken down several of the pursuing hat uncles. Once they hit a target, they would turn and pounce like hungry wolves. However, watching this textbook-perfect tactical maneuver, I couldn't help but grin coldly. I waved directly at Xiao Bai. The white fox instantly lowered its head and scurried to my feet. "Xiao Bai, these 2 beasts are yours, don't lose them," the little fox excitedly sniffed. "Well done, I'll roast a fat rabbit for you when we get home." I took out a piece of jerky, stuffed it into my mouth, and followed the 2 ruthless bandits at a leisurely pace. These beasts had not only killed so many innocent people, they dared to delay my hunting. Today I must leave them forever in the snowy mountains. Meanwhile, the Wang brothers were starving and exhausted. The less I rushed forward, the more terrified Wang Fang became. It felt like being stared at by a vengeful ghost. No matter how desperately they ran, there was always a ghostly figure in the distance, relentlessly pursuing them. They even desperately turned back and fired sniper shots, but they couldn't even touch my clothes or feet. At this point, Wang Li was completely exhausted. Her lungs felt like they were being ripped apart by blades. Wang Fang was panting heavily, staring intently at her brother. "Damn it, you can't run like this. Hide over there, we'll attack him from both sides and kill him." Wang Li's eyes hardened. She turned towards me and pulled the trigger. Bang! I instantly dodged and pressed myself against the thick, taking advantage of the opening. Behind the tree trunk, Wang Li ran wildly down the hillside like a stray dog for over 100 meters. Unexpectedly, Wang Fang turned around and fled in the opposite direction. In the two ruthless bandits' plan, if I dared to chase either of them, they could turn around and surround me. I never expected that. Watching the two split up, my smile almost reached my ears. Just as I was worrying about how to defeat them one by one, these two idiots actually broke up their formation. Xiao Bai went first, dealing with the little fox at the top. The fox blinked its eyes, its face full of excitement, and it led the way close to the ground. Two of them circled around like ghosts, stealthily approaching Wang Li's hiding place. Wang Li was hiding behind the bushes, secretly pleased with himself. Just as he caught his breath and was about to get up and change positions, a cold voice exploded in his ear. "Brother, are you looking for me?" Wang Li was so shocked that her hair stood on end. Before she could even turn her head, she slung the gun barrel over her shoulder and was about to pull the trigger. At the critical moment, my large hands, like an iron clamp, gripped the scorching hot barrel. "Captain, something terrible has happened. Fugui and I have run into a bandit while fishing." Zhao Kaishan was instantly terrified, breaking out in a cold sweat and frantically shaking Fugui and his gang. Quanfu cried out, saying that Fugui told him to run first while he hid behind a sack, too afraid to show his face. Zhao Kaishan, his eyes bloodshot with anxiety, instantly imagined my life hanging by a thread. He rushed into the brigade headquarters like a madman and turned on the loudspeaker. In less than 10 minutes, more than 20 armed militia men from the entire village, their eyes red with fury, were assembled. "Comrades, Fugui is being surrounded by bandits. If you encounter a criminal, kill him on sight." Led by Quanfu, the main force, like desperate warriors, charged towards the frozen lake. Everyone in the village thought I was hiding behind a sack, trembling with fear. Little did they know, the situation in the mountains had completely spiraled out of control. Wang Fang, full of anticipation, reached the mountainside, only to be horrified by the scene before him. His ruthless second brother was slumped like a lump of mud, his soul seemingly leaving his body. A sharp military dagger was embedded in Wang Li's chest under the tree, blood and foam continuously gushing from her mouth and nose. Rewind a minute, I gripped Wang Li's gun barrel, rupturing her liver. Wang Lighting's eyes bulged, staring desperately into my calm, emotionless eyes. He never dreamed that the one who would end his life would be such a young, fiery person. I gently pulled the homemade shotgun from his hand. Wang Li could only let out a weak, whimpering sob. The world before her eyes was quickly swallowed by darkness until Wang Fang patted her shoulder, and she barely managed to open her eyelids, trying to warn me. Sadly, he didn't even utter a syllable before his head lolled to the side and he breathed his last. Wang Li and Wang Fang let out a desperate scream as they watched their brother die tragically. Just then, a deathly judgment exploded above their heads. Bang! A scalding bullet instantly pierced Wang Fang's chest. He collapsed forward uncontrollably, twisting his body with difficulty, vomiting blood. The last thing he saw was me, like a god of death, holding a gun and coldly stepping on his head. Wang Fang fell, desperately clutching his bleeding chest. "Don't kill me, I hid gold in the cave, it's all yours," he pleaded like a dead dog. "You're confused, even if you die, the gold is still mine." Before he finished speaking, I suddenly pulled out my military dagger, then slashed it backhand, piercing Wang Fang's neck. The infamous two kings, notorious bandits, were utterly ended by me in this snowy forest. Afterward, I wiped the blood off the dagger from Wang Fang's body, skillfully picked up the rifle from the ground, slung it over my shoulder, and held the homemade shotgun upside down in my hand. Then I ransacked both of their pockets, finding a large pile of bullets, but the biggest surprise was yet to come. I found a genuine black Type 54 pistol, 7.62 caliber, hidden in Wang Fang's lower back. It could penetrate a 3-thick iron plate at 25 meters. This thing, concealed on my person as a secondary weapon, was practically a god-level cheat code. Combined with my original hunting rifle and semi-automatic rifle, my current firepower was comparable to a human-shaped self-propelled artillery platform. As for the captured rifle and shotgun, I was about to hand over the reward to the authorities, Xiaobai rushed up and bit Wang Fang's trouser leg, tearing at it wildly. This little drama queen, seeing the danger was over, ran out and started showing off her strength. I crouched down, flicked her forehead, and shoved a piece of jerky into her mouth. "All right, stop acting." Can we find these two beasts' hideout by following their scent? But then the little fox suddenly twitched its nose, turned, and ran wildly into the deep mountains. I strode after it, following closely behind. A dozen minutes later, a hidden cave completely blocked by bushes appeared before me. If it weren't for Xiaobai, this living radar, no ordinary person would have found this place. I lit a waxed branch. Charging out like madmen, they all thought I had been captured by the bandits. Shot like Civ Fugui, I said, sitting on the ice. I looked up and smiled. Here comes Captain Zhao Kaishan, gun in hand, his voice trembling with urgency. Where are the fugitives? I casually pointed to the depths of the woods. Stop, they're lying over there. When a large group of men followed me to the scene of the battle, the entire area fell into a deathly silence. Everyone gasped, looking at me as if I were a monster. You killed both of them. He crouched down, staring intently at the fatal wounds on the bodies. One had been pierced through the chest by a triangular bayonet, the other had his throat slit. 2 against 1 in a desperate situation where the enemy was armed, close quarters combat. This is something a hunter under 20 years old could do. Captain, these are their guns. After handing over the captured rifle and shotgun, I casually tossed them to Zhao Kaishan. Zhao Kaishan excitedly punched me on the shoulder, repeatedly saying that he was definitely going to get a commendation this time. However, the next second, what I said made everyone's jaws drop. Hey Captain, since everyone's brought their weapons, let's help catch some fish. Everyone will have meat to eat when we get back to the village tonight. The room fell silent instantly. I had just personally killed 2 ruthless national bandits, and now I was still chatting and laughing, thinking about catching fish. Zhao Kaishan was completely convinced. This kid, would he be a reincarnation of a killing god?